how did the Jews of first century Israel, under Herod the Great, move these stones? And I always get so tickled because when we go there and we see some of them and we're going along the wall, they have all of these displays trying to explain how Herod moved, his engineers moved these stones, and they almost always have them rolling them on logs, you know. There's not a wood in the world. When we start talking about a stone that's over 1,200 tons, there's not a piece of, not even one of the big California redwoods is going to stand up under this kind of weight. Not only that, but how did they get the stone up on top of the tree? You know, I get very, it's very interesting. I get so tickled at how they try to explain all of these things when they know that it's an impossibility. The bottom line is we don't know how they did it. So these people, and the more technologically advanced you see them in the past, actually it's also a reflection of their spirituality. The more spiritually advanced they are. These were spiritually strong people, very, very strong, not ignorant, not anything like that. Back to the riddle. Hated by all those around him, he goes back to the land of Israel, hated by all those around him, despised and rejected, man of sorrow. If we read the history of the nation of Israel from their trip at the Exodus, by the time they come to the land of Israel 40 years later, it's very, very clear to us that everyone around them despises them, hates them very, very much, for no other reason, and this is the only reason, than their relationship with God. That's the only reason. Because their relationship with God actually made them prosperous, actually made them, I mean, they had all kinds of excuses to hate them. You know, I think about people hated Abraham because he obviously had such power with God. People hated Isaac, you know, because Isaac was one of the most prosperous people in the world. If you've ever been in Israel, you understand, because every time Isaac dug a well, he struck water. This is a level of prosperity that's unbelievable in the land of Israel, where it rains, you know, in December and January and February, and then it doesn't rain for the rest of the year. If you don't have water, you're in a real bind. And Isaac never dug a dry hole. People hated Jacob because Jacob is a very peculiar person, because he's different than everybody else. He thinks on a different level. He acts a different way. Which he is so misrepresented. I hate it that he is so misrepresented. And don't let me get off here for very long, because this is one of my pet peeves. Because see, there's not an English translation in the world that actually correctly translates what the Hebrew says about Jacob. It talks about that Esau was a man of the field, a trapper, okay, and it talks about how actually the text literally says about Esau that Esau trapped with his mouth. Now that begins to tell us something about Esau. He trapped with his mouth. If we take it literally, now that's never been taken literally. It's always put into a way of, let me see how exactly it says. It's always put into a way where it appears that he made good food, you know, for Isaac, and this is one of the reasons that Isaac loves him so much. But it has to do, in the Hebrew text, it has to do with him trapping with his mouth. Genesis 25, verse 27, it says, "And the boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field." Well, those words "cunning hunter" there literally mean he trapped with his mouth. That means he's a hunter, okay, but he hunts people with his words. He is a manipulator par excellence with his words. And then it says, "And Jacob was the King James says plain man. New King James says quiet man, dwelling in tents." Well, now, if we know the oral Torah and if we know Hebrew, suddenly this takes on a whole different perspective. Because what it says is Jacob was an Ish Tom. Ish is man. Tom is perfect. What? See, See, this is an amazing thing. Translators could not come to this text, and even though they knew Hebrew, they could not and would not translate the word tam as perfect. So they had to come up with secondary meanings of it, which is simple. That really, a simple person. But it's a simple person in the sense of naive, in the sense of being childlike. But it has nothing to do with being childlike here. It has being, his faith is what it's talking about. When God tells Abraham, walk before me and be thou perfect, he uses the exact same words. Be an ishtam, be a perfect man, walk before me and be perfect. The same words are used about Jacob, but it doesn't, but we just can't bring ourselves to translate those words accurately, because that means it goes against what we've always been taught about Jacob, that he was a deceiver, that he was a conniver, that he was a liar, all of these things. Now it's interesting to me that the person who says that he's a deceiver and that he's a schemer, the person whose mouth that comes out of is Esau, who the Bible tells us he traps with his mouth. He obviously did a very good job, because he's trapped most people for 4,000 years into thinking that Jacob was a terrible person, when God says very specifically Jacob was a perfect man. Listen, this is what Esau says. Genesis chapter 27 in verse 36, and he said, is not he rightly named Jacob? Which I've never been able to figure that out, because that's also a very secondary meaning way on down the line of what Jacob actually means, Yaakov. Yaakov, literally he's called that because he held on to Esau's heel. But if we look at the etymology of the Hebrew, why do we say that? Why does it have to do with heel? It actually means heel, the word Yaakov, it means heel. The sages come and they look at this and they say, oh, well, Jacob was a heel, because a heel always follows the toes. And Jacob always followed God. And that's really what, in one sense, what his name is meaning. It's not that he tripped people, it's he always follows God. In fact, that's the real meaning of what heel means in Hebrew. Akev, which is the root of Jacob's name, literally means the follower. It follows. In fact, it's a word that we use even today to say because. Because what? Because, in other words, it follows. Because of this, then this follows this. It's very, very interesting. Anyway, he says, you've named him Jacob because he has supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, which he didn't. He sold it. In fact, the scripture even in the New Testament talks about how Esau despised his birthright. So Jacob didn't take it from him. He sold it. So there's one lie. And behold, now he has taken away my blessing. And he said, and he's saying, do you not have a blessing reserved for me? Well, it's very interesting that the person that those words come from is Esau, who's, the scripture says very, very clearly, is a manipulator with his tongue. So that's one of my pet peeves.